Hello everyone, welcome to our Risk Management School. My name is Nicolai Cose and I'm a member of the Pirani team. I'm excited to be here with you today to explore the theoretical and practical aspect of the different topics that we will see. To help us delve into this session on how to create effective risk management controls, we're happy to have with us Alejandro Orrego, CEO at Pirani. Hello Alejandro, how are you?
Hi Nicole, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today in this third masterclass of risk management.
Thank you, Alejandro. Before we begin, I would love to invite everyone to continue learning about the world of risk management school by visiting the Pirani Academy, where you will find valuable learning material. I will leave the link in the chat now so you can research the website. There you are. Okay. And finally, if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to make them through the question and answer section. We will be happy to answer them at the end of the webinar. Now, let's begin with this exciting topic. Over to you, Alejandro.
Thank you, Nicole. And thank you, everyone that connects that early. I don't know if you want to put what time is in your countries, because in the last sessions, there are people from Asia and Europe, and I don't know what time is there. And so let's start with the risk management of today. We're going to talk about controls. Remember that in this season of this risk management school, we're talking about the risk management cycle. We want to abroad all this in the whole season, but we going to focus in every class in one of the phases or the stages of the cycle. In the last two classes, we talked about the identified context, about processes and risks. The last season, we talked about measure risks. So we learn about what is the process map of my company. How can I categorize those processes? We also learned that once we identify the process of my company, we can link or associate the risks that my company or the process is exposed to. We also learned that we can associate as many risks as we need for every process of my company. We learn how to measure or rate those risks in the risk heat map to understand what risks are more critical, on which one we need to focus on. And we learned that once we put the risks in a quadrant in the risk heat map, we have the inherent risk. So today we're going to talk about the third phase in the risk management cycle. We're going to talk about the risk management strategies, also known as controls, right? This is the roadmap of the risk management season. So, well, Sander, hi Sander from Abu Dhabi. This is your third class. I remember you for every season. Good. Okay, so remember when we put a risk in the risk heat map, and for instance, is in the orange area. The next step after this is to decide what is the risk treatment that we're going to do for that specific risk. And we basically have four options. We can avoid the risk. And here, remember, the risks cannot be eliminated. You cannot delete the risks. The risks not going to disappear. The only thing that you can do with the risk is one of these four things. What is avoid a risk? Again, it's not eliminate the risk. Avoid is taking steps to eliminate the risk altogether. For example, if a company decides to avoid the risk of certain product line, it may choose to discontinue that product line entirely. Another example, maybe I want to open a headquarters or operations in Ukraine. But and I put all the risks associated with creating or open or landing in Ukraine. But once I understand that the risks are very wide, or I don't want to embrace those risks, I avoid that step that I wanted to do. So avoid the risk is not going to be eliminated. I decided not to open operation in Ukraine. That's avoid the risks, right? Or maybe I want to launch a new product, a new line, but after understand the risks associated with this line of products, I decided not to launch the line of the product. Again, the risk is still there. I decided not to take those risks. Again, right? Another risk treatment example is mitigation. And we're going to focus on mitigation today, because mitigation involves taking steps to reduce the likelihood or impact of the risks. For example, if a company identifies a cybersecurity risk, it may implement additional security measures to reduce the likelihood of the cyber attack. It's basically that if the risk is orange, I can put controls or do anything to mitigate that risk and maybe move from orange to yellow or to green. That's mitigate the risk. And we're going to talk about this in this session, right? Again, the risk is not eliminated. You working with the risks and you moving the risks in the risk heat map. Another risk treatment that you can do is transfer. Transfer involves transferring the risk to another party, such as an insurance company. For example, a company may purchase insurance to transfer the risk of natural disaster or other event that could result in financial losses. Maybe a risk that I identify is an earthquake or a hurricane. So maybe you say, okay, what can I do if an earthquake takes place in my city? Okay, maybe you can build or reinforce the building, whatever you can do. But maybe the risk is so high that you transfer the risk to an insurance company. So this is the basic example of transfer, the risk, because it's not in your control to do or to mitigate that risk. And another thing that you can do with the risk is accept the risk. This involves accepting the risk without taking any further action. This may be appropriate if the likelihood or impact of the risk are deemed to be low, or if the cost of mitigating the risk is greater than the potential impact. Maybe in your risk heat map, you have a lot of risks. And again, you need to focus on the one or those that you can work with. And maybe you have a risk here and here and here, and maybe they're in green, and maybe you choose to accept that risk and to do nothing. Maybe in the meantime, or maybe right now in the short terms, and you're going to focus on all these, and you don't going to put any control on the risks over here. That is a possibility as well. So again, once you choose the risk treatment that you want to do with the risk that you identify, so let's go to focus on the mitigation. I mean, if you choose to mitigate a risk, how you can do that, right? So start with the definition of controls. How can I mitigate a risk? We talk about the concept of controls. So in the context of risk management, controls refer to the measures and actions implemented to mitigate or manage risks within an organization. Controls are put in place to minimize the likelihood or impact of potential risks to ensure the achievement of objectives. Remember the definition that we talked about risks, right? So controls can take various forms, including policies, procedures, practices, guidelines, tools, technologies, or any other mechanism designed to identify, assess, monitor, and control the risks. They act as safeguards. So if we go into in this graphic, remember if your risk is here in this orange area, once you put a control, you want to move the risk maybe here to move the likelihood, to reduce, to move from possible to remote or unlikely, or the impact, or maybe both. That's why you implement controls, right? And those controls have different categories. Maybe you have preventive controls, that these are measures implemented to prevent risks from occurring or minimize their likelihood. Examples include access restrictions, training programs, segregation of duties, or physical security measures to prevent the controls. Or maybe it's detective controls that are designed to identify risks or potential issues after they have occurred or are in process. Examples include security monitoring system, regular audits, data analysis, or incident report mechanisms. You can also have corrective controls. These controls are put in place to address and rectify risks or issues that have already occurred. They focus on minimizing the impact of restoring normalcy. Examples include backup and recovery systems, incident response plans, and disaster recovery procedures. And this is not very used concept, but you also can have compensating controls. These controls are alternative measures used to compensate for the inadequacy or absence of primary controls. They provide an equivalent level of risk reduction. For example, if a specific control cannot be implemented, an organization may implement an alternative control to achieve a similar level of risk mitigation. Maybe you design a controls and you figured it out that a control doesn't work, so you create a new one. So that's the compensating controls, right? And once you create a control and you associate the control with the risk, and you already have the process, you already have the risk, so you ask yourself, okay, what can I do to mitigate the risks? So this control is going to mitigate the impact, is going to mitigate the likelihood, is going to mitigate both. That this is very strange. For instance, if you have a delivery person in your company, and maybe you want to reduce the risk of work accident in the motorcycle, and maybe a control that you want to put in that risk is the helmet or the attire of work clothes. If you put a helmet on a delivery guy, the helmet is not going to reduce the likelihood that accident can occur. The helmet is going to reduce the impact if he falls or if he has an accident, right? So every control that you design, you need to understand what this control is going to mitigate, the impact or the likelihood. So once you link a control with a risk, and that control reduce or mitigate the likelihood or the impact, you're going to move the risk from, in this example, from the orange area to the green area. And that is known of the residual risk. The residual risk is the level of risk that remains after control or risk management strategy have been implemented to reduce the inherent risks of an activity, process, or system. So maybe you associate one control for a specific risk, and this specific control moves the risk, the inherent risk from orange to yellow or to green. And you can also associate another control, a second control, that move a little bit longer. And maybe with the second control, you move the risks from moderate to minor impact. This what is the strategies of risk management are about. And this is risk management in these first 3 stages. So the question here is, and how do I know if the control that I create is going to move 1 or 2 blocks, or how can I reduce the subjectivity of these definitions, right? And that's a very good question, because all the controls are not the same. All the controls, we talk about the categories of the controls, but what controls are stronger than the others, or what controls move 1 block or 2 blocks, in order to understand what is this movement. So the control, you need to understand that the design, the creation of a control has 2 stages. One is the design of the control, and is the execution of the control. Maybe you're starting in risk management and you want to create the controls for your company. So you create a specific control, and so you are in the planning or design stage. So the design of the control refers to the process of conceptualizing and creating the control itself. Involves determining the structure, components, parameters of the controls. During the design phase, the control is planned, documented, tailored to address a specific risk or objectives. Key considerations include the control's objectives, activity, responsibilities, integration with the existing processes. But again, in this phase, you only planning, but in the real life, maybe that control didn't work, or you understand more data or more specific things about the control or the risks or the process itself. So there's another important aspect of the control, that is the execution of control. When you design it and run the control, so the execution of the control refers to the actual implementation and operationalization of the control, involves putting the design control into action and executing the activities defined in the design. It's about monitoring the performance of the control. There are no perfect design of anything. You want to put an effort and good intention in the design of the controls. With experience, you're going to create better controls over time, but it's crucial, the execution, and to monitor what's happening with the control. So some key consideration in every phase. For instance, in the design phase of creating controls, it's important the risk assessment. You need to talk with the people. The control should be based on a true understanding of the associated risks. And that's why it's important to run the phases of the risk management process. When you understand the context of your company and then you understand the risks, it's better to create a control and not start from the control and then imagine a process or imagine a risk for the control. You need to follow the steps. You need to have clear objectives. What is this control is about? What we want to reduce. We want to reduce the likelihood. We want to reduce the impact. What is the control is going to do? The control, if the control is a policy or is a procedure, you have to have very clear the activities. What the control is going to do is not only put the name of the control. Okay, we're going to have a policy of cybersecurity. Oh, great. What are the activities of the policy? What you're going to do is not just the name. It's important that the control have a segregation of duties. The control need to have a team or an owner who's the responsible of the control. And the control need to have scalability and flexibility, because again, another phase of the risk management is the implementation, is the execution. So maybe you create the control that you think is perfect for you or for your company, but once the control is running, you understand, oh, maybe I need to change this or that in order to adequate the control more for my company. And that's okay, right? So another key aspect in the creation of the control in the execution phase is, of course, implementing planning, develop a well-defined plan for implementing the control. How we're going to run this control is not just name the control and that's it. Okay, if you want to run a policy or a procedure, is not just have the document in the file. You need to run the policy, or you need to run the procedure. You need to train your people in that policy. And that's the second a key. Training and awareness. Provide appropriate training and awareness program to personnel responsible for executing the control. Ensure that they have the necessary knowledge and skill to carry out their control effectiveness. Monitor and supervise the control. That's the key. Establish a mechanism for ongoing monitoring and supervision of the control execution, and for documentation and communication. Because remember that in the process, people come and go. Maybe you're going to hire new people. Your team is going to grow. So the people that came in the company need to understand what the control is about. It needs to be documented, and they need to understand what the control is about. And continuous improvement. Have the flexibility to understand that the control can be better over time, with the knowledge that you acquire in the process. So be prepared for that. That's key in the creation of the control and in the whole definition of risk management. And then once you have this concept of design and execution, you will have a control robustness level, because maybe you're going to have, I don't know, 10 or 100 controls in your company, or 50 or whatever number you decide. So all the controls is not going to be in the same level. Maybe one control is going to move you 2 blocks in the risk heat map, and another controls only going to move you 1 block, and that's okay. All the controls not need to be the same. So maybe you're going to have strong or high robustness controls that are characterized by the effectiveness in preventing or mitigating the risks. A control that prevents a risk is always going to be better than a corrective one. You're going to have moderate controls that are generally effective, but may have some limitations or areas from improvement. And again, this is normal. You're also going to have weak or low controls. And maybe in the first stages of the controls, maybe all going to be weak, and only going to be strong when you, in the phase of execution, you understand the control, you robust your policies, or you understand the control. So the control is going to getting stronger and stronger with time. And maybe in design, all going to be weak or low or moderate. And again, this is okay. There are not perfect controls. The controls is going to be perfect with the time and with the knowledge and the experience that you acquire of the control and the risk management of your company. But maybe you say, okay, but what if I'm not very familiar, or maybe I don't know how to start creating a control? What is the good starting point to do that? So we also have another sources of controls. For instance, if you are running ISO 27001, that is a standard for information security and cybersecurity and privacy protection, the ISO, the norm, have an annex. The Annex A is an information security control reference. The norm, the ISO, is actually giving you 93 controls for you to work with. 93 controls in the 9092 version. In the last, I think 1918 or 1917 was 114. They always rewriting and understanding better the controls. So in the last version of the ISO, we have 92 controls, categorizing organizational controls, people controls, technology controls. So maybe that is going to be a good starting point. So for instance, in management responsibilities is a control. And management shall require all personnel to apply information security in accordance with the established information security policy. Topic specific policies and procedure of the organization. So you have at least the name of the definition of the control. So then you maybe want to know, okay, that control applies for my company, yes or no, and you maybe justify what yes or no, and you start working with something and not from the blank page. And we're going to see how we can do that in a risk management software in a while. So before to start the practice, we want to talk about 10 tips for you. Remember that we're going to send you the presentation and the record of the season, so you can have this for you. So these 10 tips are very important. 1, conduct a comprehensive risk assessment. Again, it's better if you first understand the process, the context of your company, then you identify the risks, and then you want to create the control. Not start from the control. It's not that easy. The cycle is important. 2, clearly define control objectives, as I told you. Articulate the objectives of each control, what you want to reduce, what you want to mitigate, and a specific risks, and you want to reduce likelihood, impact. What is the goal? What is the purpose of the control? Follow a risk-based approach. Prioritize control based on the significance or likelihood of associated risks. Remember, if you have 100 risks or 1,000, I don't know, you don't need to mitigate every single risk. It's not possible. Not for you, not for any company. You need to focus, and you need to understand what risks you want to address, what risks you want to mitigate, and focus on those, not in everyone. If everything is important, nothing is important at all. 4, involve relevant stakeholders. Remember, we talk about the 3 lines of defense. No one understands better the process of the risks than the owner of the process. And maybe they also are very aware of the control that they want to implement. They are talking, they are in that ecosystem. So maybe they understand. Maybe the talent development people know and have learned about controls in their environment. So talk with them. The risk manager is not going to have all the answers, and that's okay. 5, adopt a layered approach. Implement a combination of controls that work together to provide a layered defense against risk. Incorporate preventive, detective, and corrective. And let me go back to this concept here. Remember that a risk can have different control associated. Maybe you have a preventive control here, and if that control didn't work, maybe I have a corrective or a detective, and that's very good. If you have a very important risk in your company, maybe you want to address as many controls as you need in order to focus on that risk that is important for your company. And again, maybe there are risks that you don't want to, and you don't going to do anything, and you're going to accept that, but maybe hard risks that you want to have different controls, and that's the concept of layered controls: a preventive, corrective, detective, or as many as you need. 6, use industry best practices. Again, you don't have to invent the wheel every time. You don't have to have all the answers. Leverage industry standards, frameworks, and guidelines for control design. These resources provide proven methodologies and best practices that can and change effectiveness of your controls. Examples, the ISOs, 31,000, 27,001 for information security. COSO ERM also have some examples of controls. In the US, the NIST special publication also have a specific controls for privacy. Is a catalog of security and privacy controls for the US Federal Information System. So there are catalogs or publications that you can work with. Not copy paste. Is a starting point, but it's better than start from a blank page. 7, ensure control feasibility. Consider the practicality and feasibility of implementing the control. You cannot put a control like everybody's going to do their work very well. It's like the world peace. I mean, the design can be very emotive and aspirational, but I mean, you can do that. This is a specific and feasible control, maybe not. So start with control that you actually can run and they actually is going to exist and are realistic and achievable. 8, regularly review and update the controls. Remember, in the design process, there are no perfect control. Not even the ISO 27000 controls are perfect. The definition maybe are very good, but when you're running the control in your company, you need to understand what is the control is about and improve things in the control itself and in your company. And that's, again, good. 9, test and monitor controls. Implement mechanisms to test and monitor the effectiveness of control. Conduct regular audits, assessment, simulations to evaluate how well the controls are functioning. Establish key performance indicators or metrics to measure the control performance and monitor deviation or exceptions. And last, 10, foster a culture of risk awareness. I think that is the most important because you can have a perfect design, a perfect definition of risk, processes, controls, but if no one in the company is aware of that, no one in the company cares about it, and only the risk manager of the CEO or one person is taking care of that, is going to be very difficult. So remember the concept of the third line of defense again. The operation team need to be aware of the process of the risks of the control. They need to believe in the control. They need to understand what is the control is important, what is the control is important. It's not only a definition of the risk manager and you need to do that because I say so. They need to understand what is this important, what is this is about. So instill in a risk-aware culture through the organization, educate and train employees on risk management principles, their roles in control implementation, because only in that you're going to have a company that is aware, that are taking smart risks and are aware of the growth that they can experience because of risk management, right? So this is basically the theory that we want to share with you today. So maybe you say, okay, that theory is perfect. So how can we do this in my company? Or how can we put this in a system, or is something that help me to do this? And that's what the risk management software are about. Because maybe you buy the annex, the norm of ISO 27000. So okay, perfect. And they give you the controls. So what you're going to do with those controls? How you're going to put those controls, associate the control with the risks and with the process. So we're going to do that. So remember that we're going to show you how can you do this, all the definition of all the theory that we just share with you in a software. In this case, Pirani, the software that we have the honor to work with. Remember that Pirani is recognized by 2 years in a row for Capterra and for Software Advisor at Gartner platforms and the best risk management software globally. And we also are in the G2 environment of the grid of operational risk management as leaders and best relationship. We also are in the grid of IT risk management, the anti-money laundering, but we're all talking about general and integrated risk management. So we know something about risk management. You can have the trust that we know what we're talking about. And so let's move to the software, right? So Nicole shared with you in the chat, if you want to create the account in Pirani, it's only going to take you 2 minutes. It's not going to ask you for credit card or nothing. You could create the account in 2 minutes and you can start doing the practice exercise with us. So remember in the last classes, we talked about the controls, the processes. So we create all the processes of the company based on the process map that we have. So maybe we have delivered food. This is the process. And maybe we associate a risk for this specific process. And once we have created the risk, remember, if we create only the risks, we're going to have the inherent risks, but we don't have residual risks until I associate a control to the risks, right? That's when one risk have the same inherent and residual risks. But in this case, I have the risk of main machine failure. The inherent risk was high and the residual risk was low. Why? Because I associate the risks with 2 controls. And in this case, this control mitigates, well, not mitigate the impact, and this control mitigate the likelihood, right? That is quality plans and machines backup. And that's why I have a different residual risks. So maybe let's go to do an exercise of the process of delivery food. And maybe we're going to create the risks of accident. Maybe want to put the risks. No, sorry, I was creating it. Maybe the risk is going to be delivery accident. To have a description. We're going to, the risk is going to be measured, and the likelihood, I mean, possible. Maybe my city is, the traffic is chaotic, so maybe my delivery guy is all every once in a while have accidents. So I'm going to create the risk, and again, this is the inherent risk of the delivery accident. Remember, what is the risk treatment that we want to do with this? I should not avoid that. I cannot do that. Maybe I'm going to transfer one control. For sure is going to have an insurance for that. That's one control that I can put, and maybe we also going to mitigate. So maybe I can do both. So I'm going to create the risks. So the delivery accident, the inherent and the residual is the same. So I'm going to put the 2 controls. So maybe I'm going to create one control that is insurance for delivery. So how do I know if this control is going to be good or very strong? So remember the tips that I give you. So this software has some control questions in order to you to help you to understand and rate the qualification or the robustness of the controls. But so in this case, design the insurance for the delivery. This control is going to be preventive, corrective, or detective. What do you think? The insurance is going to prevent an accident from happening? I don't think so, right? Maybe it's going to be corrective, right? So, for instance, look at that. Once we answer the questions, we're going to see the qualification in real time. For instance, if the control is preventive, it's going to have a higher qualification. But in this case, it's corrective. This type of execution is manual, is combined, is automatic. Maybe it's manual because if the accident occurs, we're going to talk with the insurance company, all the bureaucracy that it brings. So it's going to be manual. Is this control executed repeatedly? Yes. It is documented. I hope so. Is there any evidence? But we need to have a contract of the insurance, of course. So you need to be yes. Are any control owner, they're also responsible? They need to deal with the contract or to call or whatever. So maybe you need to put yes. So look at that. We change the qualification of the control. And remember, this is the design phase, and in execution, have events being presented. Have we ever been accidents, and because of the accidents, we have to run the insurance? Maybe yes. Is the control design is effective? Well, yes. We have evidence effective. Well, we have evidence that the insurance pay me the medic treatment of the or whatever, or the reparation of the vehicle, whatever. It needs to be yes. So once we answer all the questions, we have the robustness of the qualification of this specific control, right? And then we're going to associate this control, that remember is insurance, with the risks that we create, that is delivery accident. So we're going to link with that. So we have the qualification of the control, and we have associated the risks. And we're going to put, okay, the insurance is going to reduce the impact of the likelihood of an accident. What do you think in the chat? The insurance. The insurance is going to mitigate the likelihood, is going to reduce that the accident didn't occur. Alberto, impact, that's right. The likelihood is not going to change, it's going to reduce the impact. Perfect. So we're going to have create that. So maybe we're going to create another control for the accident of the delivery. So maybe create another one that is helmet, or the protection clothes or whatever. You know what I mean? And again, we're going to put, what is this? Is this preventive, or this is corrective, or this is detective? It's going to be corrective because the helmet is not, or maybe it's preventive, because what do you think? Preventive, exactly, because if the delivery falls, the helmet prevents from an injury or a serious lesion. Is not to correct anything. So that's right. So the strength is stronger. And okay, we're going to put this execution is manual. What is manual? Because if the delivery forgets to put the helmet, so if this is manual, the strong is weaker. It's not the same and automatic, right? It is documented, isn't documented, it has evidence, no, so the execution, yes, yes, now. Now we're going to associate the helmet again with the risk of delivery accident. And this, the helmet is going to reduce the impact of the likelihood. The impact, right? Because the helmet is not going to reduce the likelihood. Maybe you can say, oh, because maybe the helmet reduce the visibility of the delivery, so they're going to fall more often. But that's an extreme case of put that mitigate the impact. So we're going to create. So we create two controls, one medium, one regular, and associate two controls with a specific risk. So in this specific case, this risk, even with two controls, we're not reducing very much. We're not moving. So maybe we need to have more controls, right? So maybe another control is a campaign of awareness of not driving like crazy on the streets, or with a good, you know, and that's preventive. So that's another control that we can put in that specific risks. So this is risk management. You're going to create different controls in order to mitigate, if you want to, the risks of your company. So let's going to have another example, because this is specific, as you see, is very difficult to track because are very specific things. Maybe they forget to put the helmet, or maybe the insurance is only corrective. What we actually have to prevent the risks from happening. So let's going to move in the information security risk management system that we also have. And remember that we talked to you about there are sources of information of controls. So in this case, in the information security management system, we have all the controls of the ISO norm in Pirani, all the 93 controls. And you can filter, okay, so remember, you can create controls one by one in your company, but you can also import. Maybe you already bought the NIST special publication, or maybe you already have the controls in Microsoft Excel or whatever. So you can import all the controls that you need for your company. So maybe we import the ISO 27001 controls, and maybe we're going to see, okay, show me only the people controls that the ISO norm tell me, okay, we have screening, disciplinary processes, information security event reporting, remote working, with the definition of the ISO. So we have a good point to start. So we know that the remote working is the 6.7 control of the norm, of the norm ISO 27000. We have the description of the ISO. Security measures shall be implemented when personnel are working remotely to promote information, assess, process, and store outside the organization premises. But again, that definition, that design is good, but it is good for your company. You're going to do that. You really need to run that control in your context. I don't know. For some of the 93, for sure is going to be yes, but maybe for your company, you're only going to run, I don't know, 10 of the 93, and that's okay as well. So you can create a specific fields and the control, for instance, here. So the category control in this case is people control. Remember that there are 4 categories in the norm. So maybe you want to, another thing in the norm is that you want to have the statement of applicability. So, okay, we're going to do this, yes or no, in my company. and you put the justification, why yes or why no, and you can put what is the implementation stage of this control specific. So what this is when your company have more maturity and have more information to do these controls, but you can start with the other aspects, because remember that you can create all the fields that you want in the control definition of your company and associate this specific control with your risks, in this case with information assets and processes. So we wanted to show you this, that you can also do this if you don't want to start creating controls from zero. But maybe you say, but how can I customize the questions of the qualification of the control? Maybe I want to ask another things, or maybe I want to put in specific descriptions for my company, for my collaborators, for my employees to understand better the definition. Or maybe I want to give more importance in the execution phase, that design phase of in my company. In Pirani, you can also do that. So we're going to do with, because remember, in Pirani, we give you custom things that if you don't want to start from zero, and maybe you don't want to create the specific questions to qualify the controls, but maybe you have a more experience and you have more maturity level, so you want to change that, and you can also do that. So maybe you, in the setting of Pirani, you can do, okay, I'm going to give you more importance to execution that to design, and maybe I want to change the questions and to assign a different weight in every. So maybe control type, we have preventive. We're going to edit the parameters. So remember that we have the control type that corrective, detective, and preventive. And maybe we're going to put the another one that we put you here, that is, sorry. The compensating control. Maybe we want to put that category as well in my software if you're going to use it, and maybe you want to change the weight on everyone, and you can do all that in Pirani. You create another specific question for the execution, and you also can create a specific robustness levels for your company. You're excellent or weak, or maybe you only want to work with 3 levels. That's also okay for your company. And another thing that is very important in risk management, okay, all the controls that I have in my company, how can I say if how many are good, are bad, or whatever? So we also have a report that we're going to talk more about in another class of reporting. Well, you can also have, for in this case specific, what are the controls of my company are working? I know that 82% are excellent and only less than 1% is weak. So that maybe gives you information about the risk management of your company. So that's the next steps in this risk management season. In the next class, we're going to talk about, okay, we addressed already the 3 first steps of the risk management cycle. So in the next risk management school, we're going to talk about monitor. We're going to talk about about events, that is risk materialization. And then we're going to talk about continuous improvement, how can create action plans to correct or improve the controls or the risks or the process, and maybe how we can also have assessment plans in order to rate or measure better the risks of the controls. Because maybe the robustness qualification of today of the control is not perfect. And once you run the control, at the execution of the control is running, you're going to understand better, and because of that, you're going to have more information to do a better qualification of the control. So we also going to talk about this in a next step. And in the last classes, we're going to talk about, we do all this, and with the reports is going to help us for the decision-making support. The risk management is not only about putting perfect processes and risks and controls in the software and in Excel. Is what are you doing with this information? What are you doing in your company in order to grow better and to smart taking risks? So oh my God, we talked a lot today. So
we have
in 5 minutes, do you have any questions?
Okay. Answer some of the questions that we have been asked. John, tell us about, can a residual risk move over the time in the heat map?
Sorry, I don't understand. Again, maybe I'm lost in translation.
Okay. Can a residual risk move over the time in the heat map?
That's the idea, basically. For instance, in these reports of Pirani, you can see the risk heat map report. The idea is, okay, what is the inherent risk that you have? What is the residual risk that you actually move? So like this, all this in green is a risk that you move in time because of the controls. And maybe in the risk management process, you associate more controls and you move the risks in your heat map because you choose to mitigate those risks, and that's good. And if you tell the company that, for instance, and look at this, we have a comparative map, because basically companies want to see that. Do you actually move the risks in the heat map because of risk management? And if the answer is yes, it's because you're doing a good risk management. But again, remember that you may be one specific risk that in green you say you choose accept that risk and you choose to do nothing, to live with that. And that also is okay.
Hey, let's see what William is asking. Who should be in charge of supervising the control?
That's a very good question. And my I always, it depends of the structure of your company, right? Because I don't know, maybe you are a bank or a huge company that have a risk chief officer, and you have a bureaucracy and a structure of risk management, or maybe you're a startup and you're a small company, so maybe you don't have all these roles in your company. So I don't know what is your case, but in the ideal world, I like to work with this because the first line of defense is the operations. So maybe they understand the process of they are working with, the risks that can be affect them, and also the controls. So the second line, that the risk manager or the risk analyst or the compliance is like a psychologist, is like a coach and a mentor that maybe, are you sure of that? Have you contemplated this another scenario that maybe I know about? Because you have another perspective, not in the day-to-day basis. And this is always going to be very helpful, because as the first line understand very well the process, maybe they are segregated, maybe they have only one information, and maybe the second line of defense, and that's the concept, you have another, and you can see more the landscape and not only the specific problem that they are involved. So I think this will be a very way to start. The risk and compliance that are working with is like asking questions and creating the conversation. In the conversation, knowledge emerge. I think this is my approach. This is not the only approach for sure, but this will be my answer for you.
Okay, Alejandro, Alberto asked us about what is the role of the risk management as a second line of defense in the measuring of controls?
Well, as I told you, it's like, well, let's go to read this definition. The risk management and compliance function within the organization. The second line of defense provides oversight and guidance to the first line of defense to ensure that risks are properly identified, assessed, and managed. It also ensures that the organization is in compliance with relevant laws and regulations. And in a specific way to understand, maybe the first line of defense create the name and the description of the control, and maybe the risk manager or the risk analyst will help with the qualification and explain, okay, this is preventive or corrective, because you have this concept and this definition. It's not very regular that the technology officer or the delivery has these concepts in their minds. So you're going to help them with the definition and the qualification of the control and the risk. So that's the work team that we expect. We don't expect that at least at the beginning, that the human resources team knows this concept that we shared today, preventive, corrective. You're going to help them in this rating and this qualification. And we're also going to talk about this later in the assessment, how you can create assessment plans to improve, to better understand the qualification of the control and the risks. But that is going to be another risk management school, so keep connected. And of course, we also going to share with you the presentation in PDF and the record of this session as well.
Yeah, we have 2 more questions. I have more, but I will love to answer 2 more, and that's it. If you okay.
I have to go. Okay, but one more.
Okay, one more. Catherine asks us, how can I associate evidence with the software?
I don't know if I understand the question, but in the software, you can add evidence, a specific drag and drop your file here. So maybe you say, oh, my control is documented, or I have actually a contract for the insurance. If you want to add the evidence, maybe for the audit or whatever, so you can drag and drop and explore the evidence. So that's a very good question.
Well, so that's it for the moment. Thank you so much, Alejandro, for your participation. And remember, please, that you will find a short survey that I will ask about today. What another topic would you like to know? So I would love to, if you can answer that. Thank you so much for your participation, and see you in the next session we have. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. See you next week.